Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today we're going to play a fun little game. We're going to do a thought experiment, which I think is really relevant to where you choose to relocate in the world. So I'm super curious to hear what you guys think. I'm going to give you the question in a minute, and would love to have you put it in the comments below. And then we're going to explore my perspective on this. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they match up, because people certainly have some different ideas, but I think the ideas will tend to cluster. We will find out in a minute, though. All right, so what is the question? The question is, which countries, let's say 5, just for an easy number, what are the 5 countries that you can think of which you believe with a high degree of probability, obviously there's uncertainty, so high degree of probability, will be dramatically better 10 years from now than they are today. So today we're sitting in 2021. By 2031, if we look, we're going to say, wow, this place is much better than it was in 2021. All right, so if you need to pause the video, go for it. Put your thoughts in the comment below, and let's get started. Before I go on to mine, though, if you haven't already, please smash the subscribe button, nail the notification bell, make sure you don't miss out on any of our future videos. We try to produce great content for you every day. And if you enjoy the videos, please share them with your friends. Please go back and check out some of the other ones. We got lots of great content there for you. And if you're interested in the subject on our channel, we talk about the subject that my firm does, which is we help people figure out what is the best place to go, what are the best international structures to form, how to optimize your tax, pay the lowest legal amount of tax possible, how to get residencies, citizenships, what the best ones are for you, and then help you to actually implement that in terms of setting up companies, opening bank accounts, getting residencies, getting citizenships, getting payment processing accounts, et cetera, et cetera. So happy to help you with any of that. If you're at all interested, please book a call with me. There's a link in the description below, credit.fm/Michael Rosmer, or check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so this is a really interesting thing that I've been thinking about for a while, and I try to conceptualize it because I think a lot of people can kind of get stuck on this idea of how something is today. And instead of that, I like to try to think not just about how it is today. I mean, obviously that matters if you don't want to go there and die or something, but I think it's useful to think about what's the trajectory of that place. And for me, when you think about this, there's 2 immediate questions that can come to mind. And again, I would love to hear from you on these questions as well. The first is, if we go back 5 years or 10 years, and you compare the countries that long ago to today, which are countries that have improved dramatically over that 5 to 10 year period of time? Okay. To me, this is a little bit of an indicator of which places might be better, 5 or 10 years in the future, right? So that's the first question. And again, put those in the comments below. Which places do you think have improved over the last 5 or 10 years? Next is, what are the factors that drive the improvement of a country? Because if you start to say, okay, great, I think this place is going to improve, then the question is, okay, well, hang on, why is that? Why do I think that? And we can start to kind of build mental models and have thought experiments to think, hey, listen, here is the alchemy, and kind of test that hypothesis. You can look at it in the past and say, what was it that worked for some other place versus another? And therefore, how can we make better decisions about what will improve in the future? Okay, so let's start. I'm going to start with my number 1 place that I think with a high degree of probability is going to be dramatically better 10 years from now. I think it's one of the reasons why I'm seeing lots of people move there, like in flocks that I've never seen before. And likewise, I think has improved dramatically in the last 10 years, and that is UAE. So UAE is a country that they have vision. They've got this Vision 2030 thing. If you look at what they did with their passport, they basically decided, hey, listen, they went from not a very good passport to saying, hey, we want a top 5 passport in the world. And inside 5 years, it was the most improved passport by far. Like in 1 year, they added something like 19 countries visa-free access. So very, very interesting. What I've consistently seen over the years is in UAE, in particular in Dubai, they're very aware of their problems and they're working on them. So each time I go back, there are laws that have improved, there's policies that have improved, there's infrastructure that's built, there's all these sorts of things. And so as much as I've seen it improve over time, I think it's very likely that going forward 10 years from now, it's going to be dramatically better than it is today. And that's pretty positive. So, that's certainly one place for me that ranks very high. The twin that goes along with it that's kind of the same thing is Qatar. So if you go to Doha, I mean, I kind of view Doha as being Dubai 5 years ago or something like that. So there's still a lot more construction going on in the sense things are not so finished. It's not quite so open, it's not so well known, et cetera, but they're really progressing in that direction of following on Dubai. So I think a bunch of the kind of Arab world is doing a great job of modernizing and improving and building development. Unfortunately, they have a fair amount of capital to do that with. You know, we've seen the rise of Qatar Airways, we've seen obviously the predecessor was Emirates, et cetera. And so kind of they're all moving, or not all, but there's a bunch of them that are kind of moving in the Dubai UAE model, okay? So that's some places that to me rank very highly, and some people have criticisms about them, but I think it's hard to argue that that's not the case. Now we can go and we can look at another place that equally, if we were to go back 10 years and look today, dramatic improvement, and that's China. The question is China likely to be dramatically better 10 years from now than it is today? And that's not as clear to me, right? When I sit down and I look at it, I say, okay, like they've obviously done some really good things over the last time. Like they've dramatically improved. And I think in certain metrics, it will be, again, vastly improved. On the other hand, I'm kind of concerned about some of their policies and, you know, the stance that they're taking. And will that go to some place that things are better? And, you know, this also begs the question of like, okay, what makes something better, right? I think if it's safer, that's better. You can kind of take up first principles. I was watching an interview with Lee Kuan Yew, who is the leader of Singapore for like 40 years. And he was talking about how he, you know, kind of conceptualized. He said, hey, like what makes a good country? And let's start with that and then figure out the building blocks. So, you know, a place that is safe, a place that people are healthy, a place that they have good opportunities, a place that, you know, stuff that's not corrupt, right? So on and so forth. So is China heading in that direction? Again, like in certain ways, in terms of the infrastructure, et cetera, obviously it's progressing in that regard. Is it maybe in a situation where it could teeter? Maybe. I actually tend to believe that it's probably a fairly high probability that it will be a bunch better, but you know, less certain about that, right? Now let's go on the other side and look at a place that I don't think it is clear that it's better. And this would actually be a lot of the European countries, right? If I was to compare, say, France 5 years ago to today, it's not really clear to me that France today is better than it was 5 years ago. It's not clear to me that Spain today is better than it was 5 years ago. It's not clear to me that Italy today is better than it was 5 years ago. It's possible that it is, but it's certainly not apparent if that's the case. And you can certainly make an argument to the contrary. You can certainly argue, hey, it's actually worse, right? There's some areas that it's definitely improved, but there's some areas in which it's arguably, again, just arguably not as good. So if I go and I take an alternative look, I think you can see really clearly the advances that are happening in a lot of Southeast Asia. So this is Vietnam. This is, we've seen a lot of progress in Malaysia. I love Malaysia. I think that Malaysia needs to sort out some of their political issues right now. If they can get that sorted out, I think Malaysia can unlock tremendous capability. But right now, I think that this is a good indicator of like, okay, what is one of those things? Well, you really need good leadership, right? If you don't have solid visionary leadership, if your leadership is very much like looter type leadership, you're trying to like pillage the country, that's bad. And if they're very like regressive in their policies, trying to like control and stagnate things, I think that's bad for a country. But I see a lot of progress coming in Indonesia. We've obviously seen Bali has kind of been this leading indicator of just dramatically, like the growth in Bali over the last 10 years has been phenomenal, right? Maybe, you know, more than the infrastructure can handle, but, you know, you've really seen it develop from, I think, a place that was more off the beaten track to like very world-class, 5-star resorts, world-class chefs, people like this coming there. And so I suspect that you will see Indonesia broadly is likely to continue to improve at quite a rapid pace. So I'm going to broadly kind of characterize this section of the world as being a place that I think is going to improve. So like again, certainly Vietnam, certainly I think that likely, you know, Cambodia, Indonesia, Probably not as much Thailand. I don't really see the signs that Thailand is aggressively improving. They're kind of like, yeah, that one's a little bit less certain to me. So if I was to rank on probabilities, is it going to be there? I don't know. And some of these places, by the way, the way that it's going, if you're at a sufficiently low base level, it doesn't take as much to elevate, right? Whereas if you're already at a very high standard, well then, what does it take to improve dramatically? That's, quite a bit more, right? So let's go on the flip side of things. I think a lot of people, I've never had more people calling me, talking to me about how they feel that a US citizenship is more of a liability than an asset today. People wanting to renounce their citizenship, people wanting to move away. This thing that used to be very, very rare. You can just look at the stats in the number of annual people renouncing their citizenship, and it's just going steadily up, like at an exponential rate. And so I think this is a sign that certainly many people don't believe that it's a high probability that the US is going to be dramatically better 10 years from now. In fact, a lot of people think it's likely to be much worse in 10 years, right? So that's another one. On the negative side, let's see, if we were to go over to some others, I think it's interesting to look at Eastern Europe. Broadly speaking, I think Eastern Europe is going to be the recipient of a lot of benefit from the perspective of like money and jobs relocating from the west to the east, and that's going to be good for them. They'll be able to build more infrastructure. They'll be able to, kind of bring in a lot more conveniences, bring in a lot more accessibility, etc. I think the big challenge that I see in Eastern Europe is corruption. And again, this is, broadly speaking, it's not necessarily everywhere, but certainly I think it hampers moving things forward. So if I think about like what's the mental model of a place improving, well, corruption tends to hurt that, right? Leeching leaders tend to hurt that. You tend to want kind of like a leader who is visionary, who has a policy of advancing the place, who cares a lot about weeding out corruption and bringing in efficiency and productivity, because it's just not good for your people if they have to deal with that. This also means probably removing bureaucracy, right? So the one country that I think has a lot of opportunity here, just because of the massive upside potential, is Ukraine. So Ukraine is interesting because they have a lot of problems, but on the other hand, they just have so many resources. And I feel like a lot of the issues that have been in Ukraine over the last 10 or 15 years, say there was obviously turbulence with Russia, there's been kind of some other issues in there with corruption, to an extreme extent. Obviously there's still a bunch of corruption in Ukraine, but I think that they've got kind of a higher degree of stability now, to the point that they can be building. And what I see there is just such an incredible talent pool of so many people. And I think that the flood of resources to that part of the world is going to kind of kickstart and grow that area. So to me, it's fairly probable that 10 years from now, Ukraine is going to be quite a bit better, and probably a variety of the other Eastern European countries will be as well. Okay, so that's another area. I think you can look at Africa and you can say, certain parts of it almost certainly will be. The challenge I have with Africa is that a lot of it has not reached that stage yet where the exponential growth really shows this, explosive trajectory yet. So I think certainly there's a lot of parts of Africa that are going to be better, but by and large, it hasn't, I don't think the next decade is going to be Africa's decade, if that makes sense. I think that it'll be Asia's decade, right? If we look at Latin America, I think there's something wrong in the development of Latin America. It's very hard to put your finger on, but crime rates there are almost across the board much higher than most of the rest of the world, which is interesting. You have a really bad history of a lot of defaults and currency devaluations, et cetera. There's something that they haven't quite figured out in that part of the world yet. And really, without exception, pretty much. There's obviously, Panama benefited from the Panama Canal. They've had a lot of real estate development and things like that. But it kind of is this veneer I see that kind of masks over some kind of deep underlying issues that still haven't been sorted out, that if they could sort them out would be, explosive. but I don't see that they have that figured out yet. So I don't have a lot of confidence in Latin America in general, okay? Now, one place that somebody mentioned to me as an interesting possibility, I don't personally know enough about it, but is interesting anyway, is Jamaica. They kind of gave the explanation about how it's 3 million people. It doesn't take that much to have it experience pretty major growth. You have English speakers, so they have an easy access to global markets, more so than some other places. It's well positioned in terms of the ports, etc. So I thought that was an interesting one. I'd love to hear from you guys' thoughts on what you think about that. If we look at within Europe, or Western, North, South, etc., Europe, I'm really not bullish on any of those countries, to be honest with you. I think that some of them certainly could continue to progress, etc., but it's uncertain to me how those places are likely to go. So I guess basically, in summary, to me, the clear winner that's like just they've got it figured out, at least for I think the next decade. I'm a little bit worried about when they have a transition of power, how that will happen, is UAE and Qatar. And probably broadly, there's a few of the Gulf states there. Then certainly looking across Southeast Asia, I think that area has a lot of upside, a lot of things that are being figured out. I'm super interested to explore Pakistan. I haven't been there yet, but I've watched some videos on some of the stuff that's happening in Karachi, which I find is quite interesting. And I think that then you can kind of look at, I think China is one of them that's going to do very well. And then a few of these Eastern European countries, and I would highlight among them specifically Ukraine. So anyway, those are my picks. I would love to hear your picks. Let me know in the comments. And yeah, we can have a little discussion. Maybe you think I'm totally off base. That's fantastic. Let me know. Maybe some of the ones that I am not so confident on, you're super confident on. Let me know about it. Click the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and I'm going to see you guys on the next video.